broadcast of Tap Into the Truth. Hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are and whatever you may be doing, with all of the usual caveats, of course. Been a while since I've been over here in the land of Spreaker, and, you know, I had just finished a broadcast just a little while ago over at BTR. Had some technical glitches that kind of cut into the showtime a little bit, and quite honestly, I don't feel like I was done. I had to cut short a couple of the stories, and the major issue of the day, as far as I'm concerned, is exactly how little media attention we're getting here in the United States in regards to the huge uptick in jihadist-style violence, whether you're talking about in the Philippines, whether you're talking about the bombings at the beginning here of Ramadan in Iraq, or whether you're talking about the wave of honor killings or attempted honor killings that have been taking place in Germany. In fact, there's been more than 30 that we know of. More than 30 since the beginning of this year alone. And I'm going to go down a short list of that here in a little bit, and we'll be focusing on that. But one of the things that I did, starting with the earlier broadcast, is we were talking very much along the lines of what is going on with this whole Kathy Griffin thing, and how that's a good starting a jumping off point, if you will, for the conversation about what's going on in the rest of the world. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to just sit back and hide and pretend like you're just so politically correct and everything is so good and there's no problems with Islam and there's no problems, well, you're lying to yourself. Or you're lying to everyone else because you know better. One of the two. Whether it's a matter of political expediency or just the desperate effort to not be called a terrible name, you know, like bigot or racist or, shh, don't say it, Tim, Islamophobe. Which, of course, there's no such thing. I conclusively proven that, by the way. In fact, why don't I go ahead and conclusively prove it one more time? You see, I wrote this a while back, and I'm going to look it up right now. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. And we will read it right here with the understanding that this was taking place back when Ahmed the Clock Boy was the big story. And it's taking me a few minutes, so stay with me as I do this. But I'm going over to the Tap Into the Truth website. That's tapintothetruth.com. TAPP into thetruth.com. And then I'll slide over to the blog page. Going as fast as technology will take me. And I dared to ask the question the other day about how much has changed in 4 years. And there are reasons why I asked that question. I will get back to that. But let me scroll down here, because I wrote this one a while back. So, again, I appreciate your patience. I need some music right there. Okay, there's no such thing as Islamophobia. Now, remember, I posted this back in September 25th of 2015. So it's been a couple of years, or almost a full 2 years. It's kind of hard to imagine that it's really been that long ago. But I'm going to read the whole thing in its entirety. That way you can get a full understanding. But again, for comparison and contrast, just so you know, again, almost 2 years old, the posting here. And this was back when Ahmed Mohammed, the Clock Boy, was all the rage. Okay, so it starts out simply like this. Now, unless you've been under a rock, by now you've heard about Ahmed Mohammed, although you may better know him as the Bomb Clock Kid, or the Clock Boy, as he came later to be known. At first, we were told that this very smart kid was the victim of a terrible misunderstanding, which led to the 14-year-old being arrested. Now, this terrible misunderstanding revolved around a clock, a pencil case, and school teachers who know little, if anything, about explosives, so They must be bigoted haters of all Muslims to have been concerned about the wires and the digital timers that was counting down. This was meant to be the news story to show once and for all how badly Americans treat poor, innocent Muslims. This is the narrative that we were meant to believe. But you see, young Mr. Muhammad has become the poster child of Muslim victimization. He's been invited to the White House, offered a job at Facebook when he gets older, of course, and told to enroll at MIT, also when he gets older. Now, and they were told this by MIT, all in an effort to shame those of us who might think that it is completely acceptable for school officials to take action if a student brings something to school that might be suspicious, or that the police should take action if a bomb might actually be involved. Now, the lesson that we are all meant to learn is that it is completely irrational to fear Muslims, no matter what they're doing. This is the idea that is being implanted into the minds of the masses. It's bad. You're bad if you see something suspicious. If it's a Muslim, it must be okay. Just ignore it. That's what we're told. Okay, now that's not actually in the post. I'm just adding that for effect. But if what we had been told at first was the whole truth, then there might actually be reason to feel bad for this kid who seems to be enjoying his newfound celebrity. But there does seem to be just a little bit more to the story. In an interview with Ahmed's sister, it came to light that she had been suspended from the same school district as Ahmed was, over, of all things, an alleged bomb threat. Then, a simple background check shows that Ahmed's father, Mohammed, Hassan Mohammed, got Mohammed in there twice. He must be very devout. Anyway, Ahmed's father, to be a political activist who had run for president of his native Sudan for the rest of us, twice, and made national headlines when he got involved in the Reverend Terry Jones Quran burning trial as the Quran's defense attorney. What does any of this have to do with the bomb clock event? Well, let's just say that it is likely that this family might have had some idea both how this would look and what the reaction might be. Many who have taken the time to scratch beneath the surface of the media narrative are now asking if this might not have been a planned event designed to get Ahmed suspended and gain attention. The arrest may have or may not have been part of the plan, but it certainly didn't hurt the cause. Those who have even a cursory understanding of Islam and are left wondering if this isn't part of a propaganda campaign designed to convince everyone that to be suspicious of Muslims, regardless of the circumstances, is to be Islamophobic. If a young boy has a device that in any way looks like a bomb, you must be a hateful bigot to think that it might be a reason for concern. After all, when have children ever been used to attack the enemies of Islam anywhere in the world? Right? Now, whether you believe that this was just an unfortunate set of events resulting from prejudice and fear, or you're thinking there might be a little more to it, there is one simple fact that you must know. There is no such thing as Islamophobia. Islamophobia is a word made up by the Islamic apologists who want you to ignore those who are sounding the alarm of the dangers of those who would force Sharia upon you, your neighbors, and everyone else you know. A phobia is by definition an irrational fear of something. For any non-Muslim, there is a ton of very rational reasons to fear the spread of Islam, and more importantly, to stand against it. If you are a non-Muslim, then you are a kafir, a word meaning one who conceals the truth of Islam. In the teachings of the Islamic holy texts, by not embracing Islam, you are hiding the truth, as Muslims believe that every person on the planet will become Muslim or submit to total rule by Muslims. If you are kafir, then you are the enemy of Islam, and it is not only acceptable but encouraged that Muslims deceive, plot against, hate, enslave, mock, torture, and do worse to the kafir. 64% of the Quran, 37% of the Hadith, and 81% of the Shira is devoted to telling the Muslim how to treat the kafir. So it is safe to say that more than half of Islam is focused on the treatment of non-Muslims. Another fact that all non-Muslims need to know and understand is that Islam is not a religion. Islam is a philosophy for world domination. It is a philosophy that has a religious component, but in its whole, it is a doctrine for conquest, which includes strict rules for all to live by, aka Sharia. Sharia covers everything from finance to dress codes to public behavior, and yes, the kafir is expected to live under Sharia wherever Islam is dominant. While it may be true that not all Muslims want to behead Christians, burn alive Jews, or turn little non-Muslim girls into sex slaves, it is certainly true that Islam teaches that all Muslims should in fact do these things. It teaches that those who will not convert are less than human and should not be viewed as if they are human. It is also true that because of the practice of taqiyya, it is impossible to know which Muslims would prefer to simply live in peace and which are merely waiting for the time to act. For these reasons, and many more that I simply don't have time to go into here, it is completely rational if you are a freedom-loving non-Muslim to be concerned about the spread of Islam and Sharia. If it is rational, then, by definition, there is no such thing as Islamophobia. So I stand by that argument. I stand by it, and I will not move away from it. There is no such thing as Islamophobia. You have reasons to be concerned. And again, it's not a matter of are there good Muslims, because there are. There are plenty of Muslims out there, who, some of which have never even read the Quran or the Hadith. They have learned a few verses that they were taught by their imams, and they go from there. That brings me to yet another question, and that's how much has changed in 4 years. The 4 years that I'm referring to, I will go over very quickly here. I mean, on May 22nd, 2013, an appalling and what we thought at the time to be a nation-changing crime occurred. On that day, 2 self-proclaimed soldiers of Allah, not ones who were born in some far-off Islamic land, but those who freely chose Islam as their path. They traveled to Woolwich in southeast London. And their intention? It was pretty simple. They were intending to kill just a random British soldier. It didn't matter who. If they knew they were a soldier, there you go. Lee Rigby, an innocent British soldier who had been attending an army recruitment event in London, he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was identified and then brutally murdered by these 2 savages. The two jihadists in question, after they had murdered Lee Rigsby, then stood around giving an Islam-inspired rant to the shocked onlookers and members of the public who had tried to help the victim. People who tried to help Lee Rigsby. Now, fast forward to May 22nd, 2017. You have Ariana Grande, an American singer and actress best known by conservatives for her pro-refugee, anti-America, anti-American, anti-Donald Trump statements. And she just happened to be the featured performer in a music concert in Manchester, England. Once this concert was over and the crowd was leaving, the individual by the name of Salman Abedi, a 22-year-old son of Liberian immigrants, detonated an improvised explosive device, killing himself and 22 other people, injuring an additional 59. Most of these folks were teenagers and children. You know, primarily Miss Grande's fan base. So today we are still in the grasp of mourning this. So today, as we have far too often, we mourn the loss of those taken by the forces of darkness claiming to be warriors of Allah. Today we face the stark truth that no one is safe from the wrath of jihadists who set their sights on the infidels. No one's safe. Not women, not children, no one. Today we once again see proof positive that Islam is not a religion of peace, but a ruthless philosophy for world domination that hides its intent by invoking an uncaring God that you must kill for in order to impress him enough to guarantee yourself entry into heaven. In Muhammad's own words, the Prophet was asked whether it was permissible to attack pagan warriors at night with the possibility of exposing their women and children to danger. And the Prophet replied, "They," being the women and children, "are from them," being the pagan warriors. So Muhammad establishes that it is completely permissible to kill non-combatants in the process of killing a perceived enemy. So what has changed in the 4 years between the merciless killing of Lee Rigsby on the streets of London and the slaughter of Manchester's children? Politicians have ignored their government's responsibility of vetting immigrants and refugees throughout the Western world. This is something we've seen in Germany and France and the UK and even in Canada and Australia and here in the United States as well. They have criminalized free speech, especially when that speech calls into question the source of the problem or the politicians' policies. And then they further label this free speech as being hate speech. They have redirected resources and in some places, like Germany, even taken homes from citizens in order to better accommodate the ridiculous number of unvetted people who have moved throughout Europe, claiming Mohammed as their prophet. They have made up new words like Islamophobe in order to demonize anyone who cries out for a return to sanity. Common sense would be nice. But you see, that's not all that's changed. The people are growing more and more frustrated with the forces of political correctness and the politicians who are failing to put the safety of their own people ahead of the misguided policies of appeasement or advancements of the so-called progressivism. More of the people are coming to realize that many of those politicians have been knowingly lying to them all along, and even if they're not really sure why they've been lying, they still know they're being lied to. A time is coming that if the politicians don't start doing the right thing, the people will take matters into their own hands. If and when that day comes, it will not be pretty. And worse, it may very well be innocent people who are on the receiving end of this backlash. Many Western people often confuse Sikhism with Islam. And there are many Muslims who want nothing more than to live a happy, productive life in peace with their neighbors. It is only those who embrace the way of jihad that are a threat to Western culture. So let's mourn. Let's not overreact. But for the sake of all the innocent blood that has been spilled, and for all of the innocent blood yet to be spilled but can be saved, let's take action. We must choose leaders. We must elect office holders that will stand against the evil of jihad. We must demand a return to common sense and an end to political correctness. We must stand with others who will fight for liberty and freedom, whether they are our next-door neighbor or across the pond. We must do this. There is no other option. There is no other choice. At this point, I'm going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to run down the wave of Muslim honor killings. So stay with me. I'll be right back. Tap into the Truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth.
Been bleached by the ocean water, where waves and sun and sand surround him. Breaks been slow, so we just let go. We sit out under the mellow sounds of water in the shallows. Eyes be brown, be soft, be so nice. Time goes by, we don't mind, just reflections in our eyes as we stay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thanks for staying with me as we go through a little quick break. Of course, now is a perfect opportunity to remind you that all the music you hear, with a couple of exceptions, are all provided via Magnatune, a great service for podcast-safe music. And this particular group actually works with independent artists, so these are folks that are out there trying to make it on their own, and there's just something that appeals to me about that. So I really enjoy the opportunity to help support independent artists who don't have a big label behind them. You know, there's talented artists that are trying to make their way doing what they love, and you know what? I just like that idea. All right, so now we're facing the reality of the fact that we have just a ridiculous level of expansionism of the Islamic mindset, with nothing being allowed to act as a check. Western culture, Western society has been based largely on some general principles that involve individual liberty. Over the years, depending on where you're at, whether you're in Australia, the UK, France, Germany, Sweden, wherever, Denmark, Iceland, Canada, we've all embraced certain commonalities. Now, we take these to different extremes, and sometimes that rugged individualism that you see in the United States and Canada doesn't always translate into the streets of France. And that's not a knock. You should be who you are. Nationalism, there's nothing wrong with a certain amount of nationalism. You should be proud of who you are, where you come from, and what you do. That's just simple truth. But you have existed in order to bring forth an ideology. You know, that's what these nations are built on. There's a culture that evolves. And you can say what you want to about different countries' cultures, especially pop culture. I mean, if you take a look at the pop culture, heaven help us. We've lost our minds here in the States. But at the same time, there's a lot to be said for the creativity and a lot to be said for never staying in one place, and a lot to be said for having an open society to an extent. Now, there should be limitations, and we should understand what these limitations are. Now, some people would say this is a perfect opportunity to talk about Kathy Griffin and her photo, and it's, of course, what everybody and their grandmother is talking about today in talk radio. And rightfully so, because it was really stupid. But as stupid as it was, this picture of the holding up a mock decapitated Donald Trump, a la ISIS dash ISIL, whatever you want to call them. I don't care what you call them anymore. I still call them ISIS. To me, that's what they are. That's who they are. I understand that if you don't like them, you really should call them Daesh because it's insulting to them. I could get behind that, but yeah, I call them ISIS out of habit, and I think more people here in the States still recognize ISIS before they would Daesh. Like, Daesh? What are you talking about? Yes, I know. It's a sharp criticism for where we are as a people, and we are generally uninformed, and yes, a lot of us may be fat and lazy. It's something that happens when you live soft behind the safety of liberty that's been provided to you by soldiers who paid the ultimate price. Just a few days removed from a federally day of observance here in the States, called Memorial Day. If you're an American, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not an American, maybe you're not as familiar. Look it up. It's a day where we sit back and honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice in our military. That's how all those barbecues were bought and paid for, through the blood of patriots who stood up and answered the call, which is part of what's aggravating about folks right now throughout the South trying to eliminate all traces of the Confederate military. I get that some people think that it's racist, but I also get that you do not win your argument by pretending stuff never happened. Now, if you're a regular listener to the show, then that means you're typically over at BTR. And I do need to get back to a certain level of balance. I'm actually spending more money to stay on this platform, and I'm rarely using it other than to syndicate the BTR experience. But had a really good conversation with musician and historian and friend of mine, Matt Fitzgibbons. Of course, him being in a unique position where he doesn't really have a dog in the fight. He's not a Southerner. He's not a black man. He is a historian, and he can look through the lens of history without having any personal feelings one way or the other. And we had a really good conversation. So if you are interested, and I highly recommend you either head on over to the Tap Into the Truth website, where you can find links to the past shows, or you can head straight over to blogdogradio.com and look up Tap Into the Truth there, or you can find us at Stitcher.com, TuneIn.com, at Podcast.com, Blurberry. You can find the show listed in lots of different places. And look up a recent broadcast. This one was titled, What Has Changed in 4 Years? So you can look that up. A great conversation. And we had a great caller from California call in, too, on that particular broadcast. So it was a pretty good show all the way around. And it still leaves us at a point where we need to be cognizant of the fact that if you try to erase your history, if you try to forget your history, then you are losing out. There are dark chapters in history. Is the Confederate States as they existed the happiest moments of my life here as a Tennessean? We were in the Confederacy. But as an East Tennessean, I also know that a majority of folks in this part of the state very nearly seceded from the rest of the state in order to stay in the Union. So there was a lot of mixed feelings here. We were probably one of the most pro-Union states in the Confederacy here in Tennessee. And it had a lot to do with the fact that we have an inherent sense of right or wrong in the South, but we also are human beings. And as such, we get bullied a little bit, and we get kind of mad. And that really was the feeling throughout most of the South. The majority of Confederate soldiers were folks that were really just fighting for their homes. That was their view. That was the point of view they had. And every one of these Confederates, shortly after the war was done, they passed legislation to recognize all soldiers that fought in that war as being U.S. veterans. So you're attacking veterans' monuments at this point in time, and it's all because you have this perceived racism. And there was some racist things about the Confederacy. I don't deny that, but what I do say, point blank, is that not everything about the Confederacy was based on racism. There was a whole lot of just way of life battle between the urban industrialization and farming. You know, you had the rural plantations, you had agricultural-based economy, and then you had the industrialization. Slavery is a blight on America's past, but it's one that we shouldn't forget. And when we take down monuments like this, or when we rename schools to something more politically correct, then we miss out on those opportunities to have those important discussions. And one of the things that Matt said is that we should put additional plaques up instead of taking these things down. Another suggestion that was made by someone that was in the chat room that night was, why can't, instead of tearing those down, why can't you put something that would be equally appropriate to the folks on the other side, put a new one up beside them so that you can do the compare and contrast, and you can talk about, and you can remember the historical points, and you can try to see both the good and the bad that existed within them. I mean, you're talking about people like Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was not a bad guy and was within an eyelash of being a Union general. But he felt a loyalty to his home state of Virginia, so he ultimately made the decision to fight there. At any rate, taking these monuments down, to me, just feels like an attempt to whitewash the history so we can move to a point to where we've forgotten it. And I would think by now we have very clearly seen, it's been very clearly demonstrated that when you forget your history, when you do not learn from your history, you are doomed. You are doomed to repeat it. It's difficult at best to understand why people can't do a better job of understanding this. At any rate, the whole Kathy Griffin thing is, it's a sidebar. It is a good place to jump into this conversation, though, about the dangers of Islam, because it was very ISIS-esque. But sadly for Kathy, this is somebody who is desperately trying to become relevant again. She's trying to work her way back onto the D list. She's not even on the D list anymore. I don't know if any of you guys ever saw her reality TV show, My Life on the D List. My wife tried to watch a couple of episodes, and even she gave up on it in a while, and she watches a lot of stuff kind of like that. And so I had the unfortunate occasion to have to sit through a couple of episodes when I was hanging out and the wife was watching it. You know, All I can say is thank goodness she didn't watch it very long. I don't think it was on much longer than where she stopped watching, though. I don't remember how many episodes. But, if you haven't heard of it or if you haven't seen any of it, don't feel too bad. You're really not missing out. You're not. But the thing is here, though, she really thought this was going to play. Now, she calls herself a comedian, and she has tried to be funny for a while, but I've never really thought she was that funny. From a conservative political viewpoint, I have my issues with people like Janeane Garofalo, with Roseanne Barr, with Rosie O'Donnell, because they've come out and they've made all these horribly ultra-leftist statements. They've made their politics known so clearly. But at least in the cases of like Rosie O'Donnell and Janeane Garofalo, a lot of their early work, they were legitimately good. They were funny. But there was something about after they let their politics become commonplace and common knowledge, they seem to have lost their umph. They weren't as good as they were before that. And I say that through the prism of, while I don't like their politics, I can watch these Hollywood types and these music types, and I can hear their politics, but I can still appreciate their work. I can compartmentalize well enough that I'm not judging the one on the other. I'm not letting it influence me like, I'll never watch another Janeane Garofalo movie. Of course, it's been a while since she's made one that I'm aware of, so maybe other people took care of that for us. The point being, though, is that Kathy does hang around with a group of people that are actually on board with this imagery. She hangs around with a clique of people that are so anti-Trump, so we hate Donald Trump, that she literally thought this would be a good idea. And she thought that her core audience would embrace this image, this decapitated Trump head, a la ISIS. She really thought that would play well. And then she apologized because she couldn't get mainstream people to jump on board. A lot of the leftist folks were like, no, that really is too far. You crossed the line. Al Franken said he liked it. But then Al Franken is another one of those guys who billed himself as a comedian who maybe somebody thought he was funny. So he was on Saturday Night Live for a while, and outside of the daily affirmations bit, I don't think I saw anything that was even remotely funny, and that really wasn't him being funny. That was just the writing of the daily affirmations. It was entertaining, but for the most part, I never really thought he was that funny. Now, maybe it's just me. I mean, my sense of humor is a little more slapstick, I guess. I appreciate that. I mean, at the risk of losing some man points, I'll tell you that one of the shows I really enjoy watching on Netflix is the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt show. Tina Fey is the creative force behind that, and a lot of great timing, great actors doing a great job with the characters and the parts. And this third season just came out, which is part of why it's on my mind. But watched the full season, and I've watched it from the beginning. Season 1 was absolutely hilarious. Season 2 a little less so. This last season, other than the Titus bits midway through the season where he's just randomly doing this musical stuff going down there, nowhere near as funny. But those bits, the Titus parts were actually really... If you haven't watched it yet, go ahead. It's strangely addictive. It's kind of like Aqua Teen Hunger Force was. Just completely moronic, but at the same time, it's like, okay, what are they going to do next? I mean, it's addictive because it just kind of creeps into your brain. But that's funny, and that's the kind of thing that I like. So maybe I'm just not cerebral enough for Al Franken. But there was never anything about Miss Griffin that struck me as funny. So nobody on the left would support her except for Al Franken. And then she ends up having to give this half-hearted, I don't really mean it apology. And she didn't apologize to Donald Trump. She did that patent, I don't really mean it, if you're someone I offended apology, which has become all too common, unfortunately. And we have this situation where she does this, but the mainstream media here, they want to just ignore the story. They don't want to talk about it. Meanwhile, there are a whole group of people that see this as a legitimate terroristic threat towards Donald Trump. Now, obviously, Kathy Griffin didn't intend this to be a threat. She intended this to be mildly humorous to her fan base, as small as it may be now. But the mainstream media, they wanted to ignore it. I don't even want to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about here. Go on, so on, and so forth. And, I would actually be okay with that, with the exception of the fact that, the left never looks the other way if it's a conservative that does something even remotely similar to this. And one of the really good examples, and full credit to Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh made this observation today, and he talked about the rodeo clown that we were all talking about just a few years ago, who got in so much trouble with the American political left because as being and performing the acts of rodeo clownery, he was wearing a Barack Hussein, Allahu Akbar, Obama mask. And they just acted like this is horrible. How dare you have a bull chase you? Like it's somehow okay that bulls should be chasing you wearing a Barack Obama mask. Never mind the fact that, rodeo clowns have been wearing masks for sitting presidents since the days of Nixon. They didn't complain when it was Ronald Reagan. They didn't complain when it was George W. Bush. They didn't even really complain that much when it was Gerald Ford. Although I'm sure they would have if they cared enough to even know what a rodeo was then. I mean, we are talking about the left. The home of the snowflake and such. So, at any rate, this half-hearted apology means nothing. She obviously doesn't mean it. The mainstream media would have obliterated someone from the right doing something similar. And again, Rush's example of the rodeo clown makes that perfectly clear if you remember it. And if you don't remember it, Google it. Look it up. I promise you, it's out there. It's scary that it happened, but it did happen. Sometimes the stories that go viral are somewhat frightening. But the worst part, though, is because she doesn't mean it. If folks on the left, if her fans and then friends of her fans had actually went, hey, yeah, thumbs up, I like that, and they were sharing this in a positive thing, not only would she not have made this apology, which is, it's clearly over the top. She crossed a line that most decent people would never cross. And again, comedy, it has to be edgy. And comedy is almost always at someone else's expense. I get that. I understand it. And comedians shouldn't play it safe. They shouldn't be afraid to try to cross a line or two. You just have to be good at it. George Carlin said some of the most anti-religious things ever, but the man was funny. I mean, I simultaneously was going, ha, at the same time. You couldn't help it. The man was funny. You had to be a prude with a broom up your bum in order not to just been too upset to laugh at the man. He was hilarious, but he was blasphemous. He was fearless, and he crossed that edge, and he hit that tone. Chris Rock says some of the most racist things possible. He goes to the very edge of race baiting, in fact. And he doesn't quite cross that line. He has mastered that. But he walks that edge, and again, he is not afraid to be who he is, and he does that. This with Kathy Griffin, trying once again to be relevant. And if it had been accepted, if she had gotten applause, then I guarantee you less than 24 hours later, she'd been doubling up, holding Donald in one hand and Donald's wife or his daughter or one of his sons' head in the other side, or who knows. But she would have followed it up with that and who knows how many more. And the most ridiculous thing is, although this is a la ISIS style, if ISIS could pick a list of celebrities, she would probably, if they could actually find her and acknowledge that she's a celebrity of any kind at this point, because like I said, she's trying to find her way back to the D list, but she's exactly the type of person that they would want to take out first. She's a woman. She's kind of mouthy. She's got attitude. And these aren't things that I crack on, but these are things that ISIS frowns on, and they would want to do to her what she was pretending to be enjoying doing to Donald Trump, the sitting president of the United States of America, the nation that Kathy currently calls home she's a citizen of. Now, some people, they do say this was a terroristic threat, and they want more done, and that's an overreaction. We need to understand that this is, in fact, political speech, and it is, therefore, protected speech here in the United States, as long as freedom of speech continues to exist. The left is trying hard to get rid of it. They're trying to outlaw it. They're trying to say anything that falls into the category of hate speech should not be protected. But there's another side to the First Amendment and the freedom of speech here in the States, and that is, as long as it is political, and it needs to be political. You don't have the freedom to say whatever you want, hence there are libel laws and such things. You can't just slander someone. But at the same time, if it's political, and if you can make it seem political, then it is protected, whether it's hate or not. Now, I don't like what she did. I don't like the picture. I'm appalled by it. I can't fathom what would make a citizen of a Western civilization nation want to do that. It doesn't enter into my mindset. But at the same time, it is political, and therefore, as much as I don't like it, it needs to be there. That's part of the free speech that I cherish, that I love, and that I want to see continue. So she should be okay to do it. But then there's this other aspect. Okay, so it hits the plateau of being political, so it should be protected. But you see, people get confused what those protections should be. And in reality, the only real protection you have with the freedom of speech as it's defined in our Constitution here in the United States is that you are free to say these things without having to be afraid of retribution from the government. That doesn't mean that individuals don't have a right to speak out, hence also exercising their First Amendment rights, to call you out on it, to harass you on social media, because, well, let's face it, that's really all social media is for these days, or at least that's what Twitter's for. I don't know. Presidential announcements and harassing people. That seems to be what Twitter is best at. I try to use it to share certain news stories that I think are worthy of sharing, but, that's just me. At the end of the day, you have the protected speech, but you're not protected from the backlash. You're not protected from people deciding, hey, you know what, I'm never going to another Kathy Griffin concert. She's even still doing that. I don't know. I'm never going to another Kathy Griffin movie in the theaters or renting it when it gets to the Redbox or through Comcast or however I normally rent movies. I'm not going to download it. I'm not going to buy it at the Walmart. I'm not going to pick it up at the Costco. I'm not going to do these things because it's Kathy Griffin. And that is fine, too. You have the right to do your own individual boycotts. And I'm not calling for a boycott. I'm saying that that's part of the backlash that you should expect because freedom of speech doesn't protect you from those things. It was never meant to. The other people involved, your rights end where the next person's rights begin. That's the way it's done here in the States, and that's a good thing. I like it that way because if you don't have thick enough skin to handle it, you shouldn't be dishing it out. Handle whatever. This woman's career, sadly, will probably actually pick back up because publicly a lot of these folks on the left were saying, no, you went too far. But privately, they're sneaking back around and they're high-fiving. But the whole public persona is just that. So, we'll see what happens. I suspect that the conservative folks in the country are probably going to say, no mas. A bridge too far. You stepped over that line. You went so far past the line now we can't even see the line from there. The whole 75,000-mile line, it just looks like a tiny dot from here. If you can see it, it's not there. And that may not be enough. I mean, we're going to see a similar effect. You've got Sean Hannity, who's being the target now of a Clinton-funded, Soros-funded hit job. And now you have some conservatives turning around, fighting back, trying to do the same thing, hitting them up with these wonderful, awesome, same tactics. It's like using the tactics of the left against them. How nice. And they're focusing on Rachel Maddow over at MSNBC right now. Woo, what a chick. She's out there. She's a wild one. I don't watch the show very often, but I usually see a ton of clips from her shows when I'm going through looking for individual stories to show the hypocrisy of the left. A lot of Rachel Maddow shows up in these things. So much often that I've almost had to turn off all the Rachel Maddow clips just so that I can find something other than Rachel Maddow. Like there for a while, for the outrage of the week, it took some effort for me to find something that didn't involve either Harry Reid or Nancy Pelosi. What do you got to do? Those two are a couple of wily coyotes right there. They're pretty wild, pretty out there. I got to tell you. But the bottom line is, as far as this targeting of Sean Hannity and as far as Kathy Griffin and as far as people who want me to just shut the hell up, it still comes down to a couple of very simple things, and that is, if you're listening to this, you've chosen to listen, either because you agree or because you want to hear how crazy I'm going to get. And either one's fine. But the thing is, you have the choice at any point in time that if you don't like what I'm saying, you can turn this off. You can go listen to somebody else, or you can go listen to music, or you can go watch television, or you can go I would highly suggest reading a book, after you're done listening to the podcast. Go read a book. It's good for you. It used to be that freedom of speech was something that was embraced by both sides, because it was, in fact, the classical liberals who were the staunch defenders of freedom of speech. They would never be okay with shouting down an opponent. They'd be okay with shouting, but they would want the back and forth of the shouting, not just shouting someone down. Classical liberals are actually enemies of the current so-called progressives, because the so-called progressives, they want to shut you up. And you can be on their reservation. You can be on the same team with them 99% of the time. But if you choose one time to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't know about that, then you're the enemy instantly. Now you must be silenced. Don't believe me? Look around. There's a ton of people out there that have been in that situation. A ton of them. The stories are available if you want to go look. Visit some places. Look at some of these folks that have been targeted on Twitter. Look at the Culture War segment from last Sunday's show. Go ahead. You can head over to BTR and check it out. The Culture War segment there. A couple of young ladies who visited Mexico. They picked up some tortilla recipe strategies. They were making burritos out in Washington State. They were having success. People were loving the burritos, and then the next thing you know, they ran an article in the paper about them. Yay, these two girls are doing great. And then the social justice warriors showed up and started attacking them because they were guilty of, wait for it, cultural. Anybody? They were stealing a minority's culture. So the cultural justice warriors accused these folks of stealing and profiting off of this minority culture that is the Hispanic folks of Mexico. But actually tortillas and things of that nature was Spanish. It's something that the folks of Mexico picked up while they were being ruled by Spain. If we want to talk about the cultural appropriation, that's the magic word, by the way, cultural appropriation. If some white girl decides to put cornrows in her hair, that's evil. In this case, two white girls who were generally left-leaning. They were leftists. They were millennials. They were all on board with the social justice bit, too, until they got hit so hard by this, they got battered to the point that they had to shut their business. So now, people are deprived of some of the best burritos that they could get in town, all because of cultural appropriation being thought of as a real thing. Maybe I'm just too old school to even get the idea, but in my day, and I don't think of myself as being that old, by the way, but in my day, and I know for folks a bit older than me, we had this saying that we understood that, that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So if you're trying to imitate what's going on, what someone else is doing, then that's not appropriating from a minority. That is showing genuine appreciation. And beyond that, these two girls, they went down there, they learned these things by these ladies. They called them tortilla ladies in the article. Called them tortilla ladies. They were being taught by these ladies. They were showing them the tricks and how they did things just right to get it just that way. They showed them these things. So if the minority in question is willing to share this stuff, how can you consider that cultural appropriation? And how can that appropriate, even if you want to call it that, and I think you're wrong if you do, but if you want to call it that, how is that a bad thing? Well, it's bad enough that minorities have to... No, stop. Listen to the stupidity that you're spouting and understand this. These tortilla ladies, they're looking forward to sharing and passing on information that will be lost to the next generation if somebody doesn't do something to share it. There are a lot of things that are going to be lost arts very soon. A lot of hands-on things. Hunting, fishing, camping. Another generation, if we keep following the path that the millennials are taking, the only way to do any of those will be virtually. I mean, we're going to have to move to the land of Star Trek and do all of our stuff on a holodeck with all the safety protocols in place, so there's no real danger, which means not a lot of real excitement, which means not a lot of real, period. So then what's the point? I mean, let's face facts. Human nature, we require an occasional jolt of the wonderful adrenaline. We do. It's just who we are. We need a little. Now, as we get older, we find that we could make it with much less. We don't need near as much excitement. But it doesn't really matter. It's a short change, and it's ridiculous. And we've got to move past this political correctness. We've got to see things for what they are. We've got to cut through all that stuff. So, okay, it's been an hour now. I haven't gotten to the Germany thing. I'm doing that little thing that radio hosts do, NTV hosts do, and that's we keep promising you the main thing, and we keep bringing you the other stuff too. But I'm going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, I promise this, we will get to the wave of Muslim honor killings. We're going to go through a list, and we're going to hopefully make a point with it. So in the meanwhile, stay with me. I will be right back. Thanks for being here.
So I took a little bow and left the room. I did a little dance in the shadows too. Met a little doll and she looked like you, just like you. Took a little time, filled my prescription, but there's not any left at all. She's standing naked by the window, waiting for me to fall asleep. I always fall asleep. Took a little bow and left the room. I did a little dance in the shadows too.
Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth. Thanks for staying with us through that little bit of a break while I managed to settle things down a bit. Since we're going to a harsh topic, I think it's time we went a little old school. I do this from time to time, especially over here. The sound quality is a little better on this recording. The original roll-in to the show. Going a little old school. This is how we started Tap Into the Truth back in the day.
Delving back the headlines, sorting the media bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Welcome to today's broadcast. Hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are and whatever you may be doing, with all of the usual caveats, of course. With you as always, I'm your ever so humble host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic and scenic Roane County, Tennessee. That's where we're at. That's what we're doing. That was the original intro, and I absolutely still love it. Now, obviously, we've moved on. We've tried to get a little more sophisticated, and we've got some better tunage on the intros. In fact, over at the BTR Experience, I'm doing intros now officially with the Matt Fitzgibbons song, I've Got to Be Free, which is also pretty cool. So please check out some of those over there, whether you go over to Tap Into the Truth, or you can still check us out at our Facebook page or our Twitter account, where I don't spend as much time on Twitter as I should. I have been trying to spend a little more time there, but in the process, I'm still spending that time at the Tap Into the Truth, as opposed to my regular personal account. And anyway, I promised when we came back we would talk about the wave of honor killings or attempted killings. I'm trying to make an impact here. This is legitimate. This is documented. These are all accurate. This is happening. This is in Germany alone since the beginning of this year. So I'm going to give you dates, and I'm going to give you brief descriptions of what happened. And I want you to pay close attention. There's some common themes that continue through. But we're going to get through the whole list. I actually went over a partial list the earlier broadcast tonight. And I want to try to get through the whole list here, because this is important to understand. If you are someone still on the fence, if you are someone who still believes the myth that Islam is a religion of peace, if you're someone who is sheepish and falls for the constraints of the demands of political correctness, maybe this will serve as at least a little bit of a wake-up call. Because when you see this much in this fashion, it should become clear that it is not just a few people who perverted the faith. This is part of the tenets. The one things they do latch on to more so than anything else is you keep your women in line. Now, that's not me, some mean old Republican, saying that. I'm not really that loyal to the Republican Party anyway. I'm a conservative. More importantly, if you have to have lists and you have to have labels, label me a constitutional originalist conservative. That's where I fall primarily. And if you want to add religion into it, I am a Christian as well. Now, if that information is vital to you or changes your opinion of anything you've heard, then first I would question your thought processes. But secondly, if you've got to have labels, that's the label for me. But no matter what your label is, there are truths to the dangers of Mohammedans, that being Muslims that want to emulate the life of Muhammad. They hold up Muhammad as the perfect man. And in case you're not aware, trigger alert, if you don't like the truth being dropped about Muhammad, Muhammad was an illiterate pedophile. That's far from the perfect man according to Western civilization standards. Anyway, here we go. I promised, and we're going to get started right now. Like I said, this is in Germany alone, starting this year. January 4th is the first documented case that I have here. For those of you that it matters to, the source material that I have on this is the GatesstoneInstitute.org, if you are so inclined to do the follow-up. And you can find a link to this story and several others at the Tap Into the Truth Facebook page, just FYI. But January 4th, a 44-year-old Iraqi man murdered his 19-year-old daughter because he did not approve of her boyfriend. 2 days later, he called the police, told them, quote, "I killed my daughter." The man may never face justice. He is believed to have fled back to Iraq. So, he basically told the folks there what he did, and they weren't able to catch him. January 5th, that's right, just the very next day. A 47-year-old Turkish man stabbed his estranged wife as she was walking with a friend. When she tried to run away, he chased her and stabbed her in the back with a rather long-bladed knife. January 15th, a 39-year-old Turkish man murdered his 40-year-old Syrian wife who was 9 months pregnant because she wanted a divorce. The unborn baby also died during the attack. February 1st, 26-year-old Afghan man stabbed his estranged 28-year-old wife during an argument. She managed to survive the attack, but it wasn't from a lack of trying. February 7th, 21-year-old Serbian man stabbed his ex-girlfriend after she ended their relationship and had begun dating someone else. February 10th, a 27-year-old Nigerian asylum seeker stabbed to death a 22-year-old woman after she seemingly offended his honor by rejecting his romantic advances. The woman, who happened to be a Hindu, was employed at the same asylum shelter where her attacker lived. He was arrested in Switzerland, which means he managed to get out of Germany after living in one of these asylum shelters, killing an asylum shelter worker because she said, no offense, but I'm here to just work and try to help you. I'm not interested. Well, you offended my honor. And they killed her. So that's February 10th, right? Okay, February 15th, a 51-year-old Iraqi man tried to murder his 51-year-old wife by attacking her with a hammer while she was attending a German class at a local language academy. The man was apparently angry that his wife was mixing with other language students. February 17th, a 32-year-old Turkish man shot to death his former girlfriend, a 40-year-old woman. The man said that he was angry that the woman, who had 2 children, had ended her relationship with her. February 25th, a 32-year-old German-Turkish man stabbed to death his former girlfriend, a 32-year-old German woman who had begun dating someone else. March the 2nd, a 42-year-old Iraqi man stabbed to death his 52-year-old wife, also from Iraq. Police described the murder as an honor killing. The couple's children are now in protective custody. So at least that time they got that part correct. March 3rd, a 32-year-old asylum seeker murdered a 47-year-old German woman, apparently after she ended a relationship with him. The man, who also uses an alias, was arrested in Spain. In his asylum application, he had written that he was from Israel. In another asylum application he filled in another country, he had written he was from Morocco. Officials seem to think that he's actually from Iraq. But the fact that he got to Spain after committing this crime in Germany also leads to those open border policies of the EU. All right, the very next day on March 4th, the 30-year-old Syrian asylum seeker stabbed his 32-year-old ex-girlfriend. The woman survived. Her attacker, however, remains at large. March 15th, the 40-year-old German-Turkish man stabbed to death his 34-year-old Turkish wife in front of a daycare center. Neighbors said that the couple, who were separated, had been fighting about moving their 3 children to Turkey. March 31st. Remember, this is all this year. A 43-year-old Syrian man burned his 18-year-old daughter with a cigarette and threatened to kill her. When the police intervened, the father refused to allow his daughter to leave the house. After police succeeded in bringing the girl to safety, the father and son attacked the police, who used pepper spray to fend them off. The girl is being held in protective custody, but Something tells me if she ever does go home, Daddy and brother are probably going to try again. April 5th. 34-year-old Syrian man stabbed his 28-year-old wife because she wanted a divorce. The couple's 2 children witnessed the attack. They were being held in protective custody at last report. April 16th, a 39-year-old Egyptian asylum seeker stabbed to death his 32-year-old wife. Police said the couple had been arguing at the time of the attack. Their 2 children are being held in protective custody. April 23rd, a 29-year-old Pakistani refugee murdered his girlfriend, a 41-year-old Vietnamese woman. Police say the man who arrived in Germany in December of 2015 became estranged after he noticed that the woman had not posted any photos of him on her Facebook page and suspected that she may have had, dare I say it, another boyfriend. Also on April 23rd, a 32-year-old Iraqi man strangled his 32-year-old wife in front of the couple's 3 children, ages 1, 2, and 9. On April 29th, the 29-year-old Afghan man stabbed to death a 38-year-old Afghan woman who had converted to Christianity. The attacker ambushed the woman as she was exiting a grocery store with her 2 children. And that's a really good example of the worst kind of apostate. You see, the one thing that people continue to ignore or misrepresent or not understand is that nobody is victimized more by Islam than Muslims. Islam itself leads you to believe that this split, this divide between Sunni and Shia and Wahhabism, and every divide you have, it's not like in Christianity where you have different denominations. You have literally an entire schism, and each side sees the other side as being the wrong kind of Muslim. And if you are a Muslim and you decide to convert to something other than Islam, then you're not just an apostate, but you're the worst kind of apostate, because there's nothing worse than a Muslim that becomes a kafir. You know, it's just, there's nothing worse. That's why most people, when they convert to Christianity, do so after they're well outside of Muslim communities where they're relatively safe. But anyway, this is just another example of honor killings. Now, May 4th, we're getting pretty current now. A 33-year-old Syrian asylum seeker stabbed his 24-year-old wife, a Kurdish Christian who had moved out of the couple's apartment but had returned to collect some personal belongings. The couple's 3 children, ages 6, 3, and 10 months, are all now in protective custody. May 8th, 24-year-old Ethiopian asylum seeker stabbed his 22-year-old girlfriend in the stomach at a restaurant after she allegedly provoked him. The woman was 5 months pregnant. The unborn child died in the attack. May 7th, a 37-year-old Iraqi man stabbed to death his 37-year-old wife while she was asleep in her bed. The couple's 5 children, between the ages of 4 and 15, were at home at the time of the murder and are now living with relatives. Also on May 17th, a 53-year-old Chechika man he stabbed to death his 50-year-old wife at her place of employment, a Christian daycare center. It remains unclear if the woman was a convert to Christianity or not. That part hasn't been released, but there's a really good chance that he at least thought that was something that was coming. The very next day, on May 18th, this one in Berlin itself, a 32-year-old Bosnian murdered his former girlfriend, a 35-year-old German woman, After she ended their abusive relationship, he also abducted and tortured her 12-year-old son, who was forced to watch his mother's murder. Neighbors said they had repeatedly alerted the police about the violent behavior, but the police did nothing. "2017 is on track to be a record year for honor violence in Germany. So far in the first 5 months of this year, there have been at least 30 honor killings. The actual number of honor crimes presumably is much higher. Increased censorship by the police and the media aimed at stemming anti-immigration sentiment makes it impossible to know the names and national origins of many of the victims or perpetrators, or the true circumstances surrounding many of the murders, which often appear to be honor killings but are downplayed as, well, you know, domestic disputes. It's sad that there has been this much activity, this honor violence. But sadly, it wasn't until the trial of a Kurdish man who tied one of his 3 wives to the back of a car and dragged her through the streets. Until that trial started, it drew attention to this outbreak of Muslim honor violence in Germany. Now, the honor violence, which ranges from emotional abuse to physical and sexual violence all the way up to murder, is usually carried out by a male family member against female family members who are perceived to have brought shame upon the family or the clan. Offenses include refusing to agree to an arranged marriage, entering into a relationship with a non-Muslim or someone not approved by the family, refusing to stay in an abusive marriage, or living an excessively Western lifestyle. In practice, however, the lines between crimes of honor and crimes of passion are often blurred, and any challenge to male authority can elicit retribution, which is sometimes staggeringly brutal. This court case, this individual who drug his extra wife down the street, it started on May 22nd. The court in Hanover heard how the 39-year-old Turkish-born Kurd attempted to murder his second wife after she asked him to provide financial support for their 2-year-old son. The state prosecutor tried to reconstruct the actions, and in court, this was the timeline she gave, around 6 p.m. on November 20th of 2016. The gentleman got himself into his car, went to go meet the second wife. The trunk contained a knife, an axe, and a rope. Sitting in the back seat of the car was their 2-year-old son, who had spent the weekend with him. On the street, the former couple got into an argument, and he begins hitting her. Then he takes the knife and plunges it into her chest. The 12.4 centimeter long blade penetrates the pericardium and the heart muscle. A second stab opens the left abdominal cavity. He then pulls out the axe, and with the blunt side, he hits her head and upper body, cracking her skull. He then grabs the rope, because he's not done yet. On one end, he ties a giblet knot around her neck, and then he ties the other end to a trailer hitch he has attached to the back of his VW Passat. He jumps in his car. He steps on the gas. He's racing through the streets at about 50 miles per hour. After about 208 meters, that's about 680 feet for us back in the States, the rope breaks. The second wife in this story is hurled against the curb. This individual drives himself to the police station. He turns himself in. The child is still sitting in the back seat. He witnesses all of this. Now, this draws the kind of attention that should be drawn all the time. Honor killings are happening throughout Western society. We see it time and time again. There's nothing new to this. The judge in the case asked some of the dumbest questions. And if you want to know anything more, check out the article. You can find the link at the Tap Into the Truth Facebook page. Feel free to do so. The good news is that this second wife, which of course isn't recognized as a wife under German law and isn't in most Western civilizations, nations, because polygamy is kind of frowned upon in most of the West. She survived. She lived through all of this, and there had to be a higher power at play there. She was comatose for weeks. But she lived. She got to tell her side of the story. And it is a terrible story. And it is this case that brought to light the fact that this is going on a regular basis. There's no question. There's no doubt. The threat is real. The danger is real. You've got to pay attention to this. You've got to recognize it for what it is. And it's not all Muslims. All right? So this isn't me lashing out at Muslims. A lot of Muslims have no idea what's even in the Quran. And I know that sounds condescending. It does. I hear it coming out of my mouth. I'm like, did I really say that? That sounds bad, but it's the truth. I've reiterated time and time again. Whenever I pick up the flag of counter-jihad, I reiterate over and over again, it's not about all Muslims bad. That's not the message. But Islam is bad. Muslim does not equal Islam, and that's the one thing that most non-Muslims don't understand either. So, you're just trying to justify attacking it. No. I mean, call me an Islamophobe if you want. At the top of the show, I dismissed Islamophobia. It's not real. It's not a real thing. It's not possible. There is nothing irrational about being concerned about the spread of Sharia. Sorry. Next point. There are good Muslims. There are people that are Muslims because that's how they were raised up. That's all they know. That's what they do. And many of them don't even speak Arabic, so they don't know what the imams are chanting when they're at prayers anyway. There are good people that are not involved in the orthodoxy of the faith. People want to refer to the terrorist as extremists and radicalized. Well, these aren't radicals. These are the orthodox Muslims. This is what is taught in the so-called holy text of this philosophy for world domination that hides itself behind some lame attempt at spirituality. If there is anybody out there that knows Islam and they're still telling you that it's a religion of peace, they're pulling your leg. Either they don't really know or they're lying to you. They have an agenda. So you need to be aware. So that's going to have to be it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to have to cut it short here and end things. But thanks for listening. I'm glad to have you here, and please check out the show, check out some of the past broadcasts, listen in to some of the great interviews, and remember, don't take my word for it. Definitely don't take their word for it. Be prepared to put in some effort, a little bit of time, and to use your brain if you really want to tap into the truth. Good night, everybody.
I'm looking for a miracle. Looking for a miracle. Angel looking over me. Just a breath of hope to see. I'm looking for a miracle. Looking for a miracle. Open up the doors, open